Good afternoon, everyone. The Mutkud Society Law College Dehradun, Faculty of Uttaranchal University welcomes you all to the second national online lecture series aimed at learning contemporary legal topics with some of the finest people in the field of law. I would like to welcome our speaker for today's session, Mr. Gaurav Chatterjee, partner in Kocher and Company, Professor Dr. Rajesh Bhagagarna, sir, Honorable Patron Mutkud Society, Dean, Law College Dehradun, and officiating Vice Chancellor of Uttaranchal University. Dr. Poonam Rawat Ma'am, Chairperson of Mutkud Society, Head of Department, and officiating Principal, Law College Dehradun. President, Vice President, members of the Mutkud Society, and all the participants in today's session focusing on white-collar crime. Before starting the session, I would like to introduce our worthy speaker, Mr. Gaurav Chatterjee. Sir is a partner at Kocher and Company. His areas of expertise include corporate commercial advisory, real estate, corporate litigation, and arbitration. Sir has over 10 years of litigation and arbitration experience. He is a member of the White Collar Crime Practice Desk of the firm and has been involved in representing the interest of multinational clients in the matters concerning corporate frauds committed by employees and senior management officials, money laundering, criminal breach of trust, etc. Now, I would request our Dean, Professor Dr. Rajesh Bhagagarna, sir, to address the attendees.
Thank you. On the occasion of this second national online lecture series being organized by Moot Court Society of Law College Dehradun, Faculty of Uttaranchal University, present on today as keynote speaker, Mr. Gaurav Chatterjee, partner at Kocher and Company, and Principal of Law College Dehradun, Professor Dr. Poonam Rawat, about the society, President of the Society, Ms. Anna Nupriya, Vice President, Mr. Dennis Khan, and Convener, Mr. Rahul Kumar Sharma, and of course, the host sitting before me. All the office bearers of Moot Court Society of Law College Dehradun, dear participants from Uttaranchal University and different university of the country. This is my proud privilege to welcome you all on the behalf of organizers and particularly on the behalf of entire Uttaranchal University family. So you all are welcome in this series, National Online Lecture Series. My dear friends, today is the last lecture being organized in this series. As the clear from the title itself, we have focused on some of the topics which were less discussed in the classrooms. Sometimes the topics which have not been discussed in the classroom or sometimes remotely discussed in the classroom. So the vision is that a student must know all these topics, issues which are contemporary, but may or may not be the part of syllabi. As I have told you earlier also, our syllabus is dynamic. Gradually and slowly we are trying to introduce all these topics, but there are limitations because board of study take place once in a year. And recently I see there are so many contemporary topics which have emerged in all over the world. So today's topic is also one of the very, very important contemporary topics, white collar crimes. As you know, I have already introduced this topic, but I could give justification to the concept of white collar crime while framing the syllabus of sociology. and it's a part of sociology as on date in Law College Dehradun directly. But the student with me are, they are enrolled for BA LLB honors, BBA LLB honors, also for LLB honors. So those who have enrolled in BA LLB honors, they are getting this topic and they are studying it as a part of sociology. But rest are being taught this part wherever it is applicable in law. So what we wanted that we should have knowledge of this current contemporary topic, because it is one of the topics which has come up for the discussion of every one of us in the present era. So many scams, so many bank, and so many that will be told to you by Mr. Chatterjee. But what I can say, my dear student, this is one of the topic you must understand. It will be asked to you in every competitive examinations, and it is necessary for your knowledge also. So I am not taking much of the time. And once again, I would like to welcome Mr. Gaurav Chatterjee on the behalf of Uttaranchal University. You are most welcome, Mr. Chatterjee, here. And Mr. Chatterjee, I invite you in advance, when the situation permits, do visit our college. We will invite you here once again formally when the situation permits, and we would like to have your interaction with my entire students in that particular time. So most welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Over to host.
Thank you, sir. Now, without any further delay, we connect you to our speaker for today's session, Mr. Gaurav Chatterjee.
Good afternoon, one and all. Good afternoon, Professor Dean, Principal. Thank you for extending your invite, and it's a privilege to be a part of it, and also giving a speech on something which is quite dear and near to me. So this is something which I feel, like you rightly said, Professor, is more going to be not only contemporary, but also it's going to be something which almost every lawyer will have to face on a day-to-day basis, and a very practical, very realistic thing. And additional to that, it's going to be mixed with a lot of things, because it's not something which you can directly put it into a bucket as to this exactly forms white collar crime. It's going to be a mix. There may be various things which parts or facets of it may fall into the white collar crime part, but may not be. And I personally see a lot of future in this, because the magnitude of crime, the technology advancements, and the way things are happening, there is going to be a lot of future. So from a student perspective, I seriously feel students should take this, try to understand this, because there is going to be a good amount of future in all these perspectives of white collar crimes, because the values are high, the stakes are high, the implications are high, everything is quite, the magnitude is several folds vis-a-vis a single individual case that you're doing, or any particular one matter that you're doing. So that's the importance of a white collar crime. So I'll just start off with something which how it goes, as it is from a student perspective. I've got the assistance from your colleagues and from my friends to get this PPT done up as to how students will look at it. So something which I came across was, this was basically, I don't see this is defined anywhere in any law per se, at least in Indian law, which exactly says this, within this tantamounts to white collar crime. So this doesn't, so there is no specific definition of it. However, if you look into the past, if I was Googling out, it comes out that Edwin Sutherland was the first criminology professor who coined this word, saying that what is white collar crimes, and how crimes which are of what nature, when they are committed by people having high social status and respectability, how, and the crimes committed by them, they tantamount to white collar crimes. So that's how it has been defined or coming into. So there is nothing specific that this is a white collar crime and that, but in my interpretation, it's more about high value stakes, when there's like a bank for a scam, or if it's going to be a inter trading, that is going to be anything, for example, with regard to the Securities Exchange Board of India, when there is going to be insider trading, those sort of things get into the bucket of white collar crimes. And when technology is also involved at a very high end of things being done, so they get into white collar crime. Having said that, obviously the magnitude and the volume of the entire crime is substantially higher. Supposedly it should be running into a couple of crores. How it falls into the bucket of white collar crimes. So there are a lot of scholars and people who have defined what is white collar crime, but I would like to actually skip into, and my interest goes more into the later part of the session. And like, again, it is also said these crimes are ones which are committed by people who hold offices of influence, or they hold a huge cash. They are having a high net worth individuals who are having a huge amount of cash, made between black or in white, and they are trying to do it, or their ulterior motive is with something. For example, if it is for drugs, or if it was for terror, all these things are where this money, this bottom line underlying money, it's what is being used into. So this is where the entire thing about how they rotate the entire funds, how they are able to camouflage the entire process of getting into, is where the crime happens. And unwinding that or finding that out, or in like the investigating part out of it, or the thrilling side of it, is sitting on this side. And as lawyers, possibly we would be coming on both sides of it. Some people would be on the teams of on the investigating part, some people would be on, say, various departments, starting from the CBI, CBCID, or SFIO, which is the Serious Fraud Investigation Office, or if it organization, or if it is for the Enforcement Directorate. If you see in the news, the Enforcement Directorate, the ED, has stepped up a lot. Almost you will see 1 out of 5 to 10 high profile cases getting into the hands of either the CBI or the Enforcement Directorate. They do it. In fact, if you all mingle with those investigating officers and with the team, how knowledgeable they are, how they are able to analyze a crime, it's completely different than what probably we would see how the normal police stations and the normal traffic police people handle it. These are completely a different ball game, completely different magnitude of how things are approached and handled. And again, in one of the cases I was coming across, which said in Supreme Court, which said Honorable Justice Thakur had clearly said that it's just not about a murder that is committed at the heat of the moment, but it is about how it's cold. It's like a pre-planned, well motivated, well scheduled or planned, calculated, strategically done in a way which, and there are a lot of people involved. It's not just one person does this crime and walks out. It's like a complete network. How this network operates and how they have been successful is also quite an interesting story if you start analyzing any of the cases. Because if you see in that same judgment, Justice Thakur clearly says that he tried to bucket it, but again, it's not specifically said that this judgment or this is what white collar crime is, but it's somewhere in perspective is what the judgment tries to say is when a person has direct access to the victim because of his position or his influence, and at the same time he does not have information of the offender. So it's not like they target, or it's like, okay, it's the crime done on one person or 1:1 and X and Y. It may be at the public at large, or it may be a complete sector. If you're looking at, say, insider trading, it is completely, say, the vulnerable investors or the small investors who fall prey to certain insider trading activities, or how they are, and how probably if it's an embezzlement done by employees, how employees, let's say 2 or 3 employees, maybe from the top in the management, how they are able to help in siphoning out funds. If you look at the Satyam scam, how books were concocted completely into falsifying books, and therefore it shows as if it's having a huge result, and therefore that goes, and that becomes like a it's like a cycle. It's like you've caught the tiger's tail. You just got to continue with that, and that keeps, it may have started in a much smaller amount, but over a period of time that just balloons up into it. So that's what I would suggest. My perspective of what exactly compromises of a white collar crime, according to me, is basically it's an illegal or wrongful act, but it may start something like that. it's an idea. It may start at a small level or at a one-time instance, and that actually multiplies into high values and multiplies into several times. So you do one, look at the Telgi scam, for example. He found out, okay, if you just fudge the entire stamp paper, the entire system changes, the entire revenue model changes, the entire system changes. So that becomes a model. And then in like how you say from a VC perspective, and the VC in the sense is your venture capital funding, startup ideas and all, they actually like scaling up how are you going to have high volumes of it. So this is where white collar crimes, the smaller ones, the one-off ones, the one-time ones done, they get caught, they get the whole solution, probably that person is arrested, the legal recourse is initiated, and it got to a conclusion where the punishment is done or whatever. But that stops there. These white collar crimes become when they get unnoticed at the starting level, and some loophole or some mismanagement that happens, consequently they start increasing it by high volumes and high number of people or the multiple times, which makes it huge and big. And the most important thing out of mostly what they bucket into white collar crimes are when it's done by the educated person, well educated, somebody who is holding a very good status in the society or any good designation, maybe in corporate or in the government or in any public sector, wherever it is. It is when people have influence and they have a good amount of control over a lot of things. And many a time it is when a lot of cash flows get into the entire thing. So let's say, for example, this has been stories that has been gossip since we were probably part of when we were in law school or something, saying, how do these frauds happen? They say it's 1,000 crore scam, 5,000 crore scam. Today, practically, if you look at it, if somebody gives you, let's say 10 crore rupees and says, hey, look, keep it, park it for me, let me take it back from you when I need it, it's practically, realistically, a huge challenge for anyone to do it. And it's like a joke which they also say that if you keep it under your own pillow, God knows it's going to be your family member itself or your cook or your maid who's going to probably take it away. So you can't sleep with it. And all these movies, if you see, like if you remember seeing the movie of Special Chappis or some things like these are all very interesting movies which make us realize about how white collar crimes evolve or how they happen. So that's how is my perspective. But again, the definition from Sutherland, and if you look at the website and online, various judgments, they basically come to, I've tried to put it into 10, 15, taken it from a website, which states what activities normally tend to be bucketed or not normally tend to be categorized into a white collar crime. It's bank fraud, like how Professor said, these bank frauds, huge scams, like starting from the Nirav Modi scam to say the Chanda Kochar scam for ICICI. These are all substantial because obviously the volume of money is with banks. So if somebody is able to take that out and do a scam, it's going to be huge in volumes. It's not like 1 crore or 50 lakhs or 10 lakhs. It's going to be huge sums. And how do they do it? How is it structured? There are a lot of, probably, again, it's only on a discussion perspective, it's probably a lot of lawyers, a lot of accountants, a lot of advisors, a lot of intelligent people who are at the back end who are able to give this structure so that it's able to pass through every check and balance that's already subsisting in various systems, and they come out with this. So a bank fraud tantamounts to a white collar crime. Extortion and blackmail. Take, for example, the Paytm case, how the employee or his secretary was trying to team up with a set of people and try to extort money. That's again coming into the bucket of white collar crime because there is extortion and there is blackmailing that happens where they're trying to cause harm. It may also be physically, they're trying to, like say, for example, kidnap somebody and do something. These are all falling a part of it, or expose secrets, blackmailing them, saying this will be done. That also tantamounts to white collar crime because again, the investigation is not as simple as a physical, let's say a theft or a physical injury that is caused. The investigation itself, like I said before, it's a completely different perspective itself. Again, bribery, if you see, again, with bribery, it is when you're bribing, when you're giving bribe, that itself is an offense. And actually the new act, which is the Prevention of Corruption Act, which came out in 2018, states bribe is an offense, giving bribe is an offense, even taking bribe is an offense. They can be arrested. Even they brought in the public people who work with the public department also within this ambit. They even brought in companies and corporates inside this ambit of the Public Prevention of Corruption Act. Basically, it is something like, if you all see, it is with the FCPA, how it's in the US, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Again, the other thing is money laundering. Money laundering, how do you do it? That's basically converting black money into white money, or trying, how do you illegally obtain money? How do you launder this? It's not an easy joke where somebody tells you, okay, 3,000 crores, it's sitting in one bank account, and tomorrow you go trace it back and you get the money out. Today, every scam, they are not able to find a conclusive answer because the trails are so convoluted, so layered, and such a way that it is diluted that nobody is able to trace out. And it's not like one check, 100 crores went from A bank to B bank, and there it's sitting in C bank and they take it out. It's not something that easy. And when you start working on a case, trust me, it's very, very interesting, very, very confusing also, because you will not know head or tail. You will have to just follow some trail which actually goes and leads you to nowhere. And it's something which you'll have to keep on trying with your probabilities and a gut feel, saying, okay, probably this transaction, this is a fake invoice, how it is layered, where exactly has the funds gone, because that's completely convoluted with a lot of original ones, duplicate ones. You need to find out where exactly the change happens from an original to a fake or an illegal thing, how it is done, and stuff like that. Again, embezzlement. A lot of corporate companies have a lot of people in power, the CFO or the CEO or the account side. They are in charge of the funds. They have, and when there are a lot of cash transactions, how do they amount it? Paying wages, for example, booking false invoices, how this embezzlement happens, counterfeiting, insider trading, like I said. Getting insider trading is information. People know, let's say companies' results are going to come out. Somebody knows how it's going to be, how the company has fared. And obviously, or if, say, for example, a company is striking a big deal, if that news is leaked out, how people are doing, what tantamounts to insider trading, how SEBI looks at it, all these are a complete conjoining of all these things is how you'll have to look at it. It's not only one specific act. It links with TRPC, IPC, SEBI, then PMLA, RSFIO, Companies Act. It's a mix of all of them, which actually gets into the entire white-collar crime. It may be one also, but most of the time, or many a time, it is where there is it's a mix of all of them. Against tax evasion, tax slabs in our country are one of the highest. So obviously, tax evading is something which people greatly do because they have excess unaccounted money. How do they evade it? Where do they park it? How do they do? And when they are seized, how it is to be unearthed, how you book, how are FIRs booked, how is the offense made out, and how the prosecution makes out their case. All those are quite interesting on white collar crimes because, like I said, stakes are high. It is more confusing. It's not like somebody came, took out a gun, shot somebody and walked out. Cases are not that simple in white collar crimes. Obviously, cases are not as simple even in those, but in these, it's even more confusing. Again, computer technology, IP theft, how people do it. So source codes, technology related things are so valuable and so highly. How is that taken across? Hacking, probably somebody is trying to do out phishing, for example. Banking industry faces a lot of these industrial issues with regard to phishing or somebody hacking out your bank account. Your funds are not safe. Today, each time you open a page or you're going to your banker's website, everything has a lot of issues on it. Again, professional crimes, like I said, a lot of lawyers, medical practitioners, it's all along with it. It's how it is, they all form a part of it. Again, typical characteristics of or a profile, if you look at profile hearing or if you do a profile search for who are the ones who do white collar crimes or who are the ones who are being alleged of doing white collar crimes, are people who are, again, like I said, high social status, great influence who have, and again, they have a lot of privilege or authority. They have like a signing check power signing authority, or he's got some authority to do a little bit of control on certain aspects. So these are all aspects where these sort of people, again, somebody instigates them, or they on their own due to their greed or due to their own, whatever may be the reason, they end up doing these sort of criminal activities. And like I said before, it may not be somebody thinks it's just an easy thing. It's just a small, I'm just passing out, I'm just signing one voucher, I'm just doing this. He may not be the start and end all. to the entire fraud. So he may be a small part of it and he thinks, hey, look, if X, Y, Z, these people have not bothered, then I don't think I'm really doing a big crime. Many people don't even believe that it's a crime when they're doing it because they are into so much of enjoying their high privilege, authority. People beside them give up all these build-ups and as if they are some great people who are not to be questioned. Once these attitudes get into somebody's head, he starts thinking he's not doing it a crime, he's probably doing something for the larger good of the society or some sort of self-explanation they give it to themselves that finally end up with them doing something which is a crime. Again, like I said, they don't even believe that it's a crime, they don't even realize it's something which is a thing, or they're not even aware because again, law with technology is coming up, it's evolving. So many a time you don't even know that this evasion or this activity of yours tantamounts to a crime. They are probably doing it because they feel it's a gray area. The law does not say this. Therefore, what I'm doing is just a small offense. It's not something substantial. I'm cooking my company's book. So what? It's my company. I've done it. It's not a big deal. I'm going to take the money from the bank. I'm using it for some other purpose. So what? I'm going to repay. Anyway, I'm liable. Anyway, bank has got my property. These sort of thoughts stand out. And again, over a period of time, when you start mingling with clients, when you start discussing, you will understand the vibe or reasoning they have when they justify it. And yes, you will at some points of time be defending the white collar people, and you yourself sometimes will start telling that, yes, it's not a crime. He's done this. It is the banker who did a mistake. A banker would probably release several crores against some worthy less asset. And then they book up, and then there's a fake voucher, there's a fake LC created, and then when the banker is caught that the money is missing, then everybody starts blaming, oh, this guy took it and ran off, that guy took it and ran off. Whereas it's all these people who are a part of the system, who are a part of it, who are doing. And then when you are defending, you get really upset because the blame game starts. Let's take, for example, I'm not coming to any conclusion, I have no clue out of it, but just for name's sake, take a Nirav Modi scam or a Vijay Mallya scam. It's possibly may not be where he's taken the entire money in a suitcase and went to just travel. It's been a lot of people who have been a party to it, a lot of people blessed it, impliedly, explicitly, with their knowledge and all. So these sort of things is where is it. And like I said, it's a necessity or a greed. And again, they're living a high profile life. Once it starts going down, they're not able to believe it. They then take a chance, they take a risk, they start taking a gamble, thinking they'll revive it. They've been having a good old days, how things went up and stuff like. I see people raising their hands, but I do not know, should I stop or how do we go about it? I thought there's a Q&A session at the end, but I don't.
So we have a Q&A session. So we have also shortlisted some. So we'll be presenting to you.
So should I continue, right, till the end?
Yes, sir, yes.
Okay, thank you. So these are, like I was saying, what contributes the factors for these sort of crimes, because again, it's all high economic growth. There is a lot of monopolistic. You're the only person, or you brought out this exclusive idea and you really want to make the best out of it. You're having a complete control on that particular domain or that particular business angle, and therefore you want to exploit it, and you start going so much that it starts becoming a crime, or you get so greedy that by hook or crook you want to achieve it, or you try to do it. Again, lack of knowledge of the law itself is a lot of problem. In fact, as you all will be seeing, there's a lot of laws that are amending. When I was in college, I learned 1956 Companies Act. We memorized those sections and usi sections ke saath chalate the. But now there's a new act, new SFIO has come. SFIO says, moment SFIO investigation has started, all other investigations should stop. Now, I do not know what stops, what does not stop. I may be practicing proper corporate laws, knowing Companies Act. I do not know what PMLA says. I do not know what NCLT says or IBC says. These acts are contradictory. What is FEMA? What? I have sent goods, I bought goods, I paid money, so what? But what is FEMA? Why should you not invest in companies? What is the restricted? These sort of things, a lot of lack of knowledge and a lot of complicated laws. Again, labor laws, each law is so complex, and that to unwind it itself takes time, and people end up doing something which results with the white collar crime. I will share these, and you can get these pointers very much on Google. So I'm trying to go only on something specific and something which is more important, which I feel which is close to me, is where I'm going to get emphasizing on. So now with regard to law on white collar crimes, I would suggest you all to start reading up on the Prevention of Corruption Amendment Act 2018. This is quite an interesting act which says bribe giving is an offense, how and where it can be. And again, like, it is the offense when it is being done. When does that tantamount to be punishable? When is that becoming an offense? If you and I are sitting and deliberating a structure for a particular company with a financial structure of how to do it, does that tantamount to white collar crime? We are just thinking out, and later on we find out, oh, this is a problem. This law, because of this, we don't get permitted. Therefore, this is wrong. Then you go back and start correcting the structure. When you're sitting and negotiating or doing transactions, you will come across a lot of options. You will have to do whether I do it as a share purchase agreement, whether I should do it as a BTA, whether I should do it as a slump sale, how to structure it. You have to see the tax angle, you have to see your legal angle, you'll have to see how you are in compliance with all your approvals, statutory authorities, how a lot of red tapeism also becomes a reason why people don't want to go on a particular route. You need to choose another route. Another interesting section when we're talking about white collar crime, I felt is you should read section 120 of IPC. That's quite interesting because this is, I'll tell you why also, but we'll just read the section together. It basically says concealing design to commit offense, punishable to imprisonment. Whoever intending to facilitate or knowing it to be likely, knowingly here it goes. So concealing design to commit offense, punishable with imprisonment. Whoever intending to facilitate, I'm giving emphasis on intending, or knowing it likely to be that he will thereby facilitate the commission of an offense, punishable with imprisonment. So the moment you are intending to facilitate itself, this section gets triggered. The moment you are going to be supporting somebody or going to be giving an idea saying this is how it is, this is the crime, how you should structure it, because end of the day you're a lawyers. You will have a lot of friends who are going to come out to you and start giving you a lot of ideas saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, how to do it. The moment you start giving these ideas itself, then you also become a party to the offense. You are also liable to be imprisoned. So please be careful. Please, when you're advising, because starting stages of your career, there's a lot of enthu, you get a lot of advice and a lot of chances of you getting misled. I've got a few friends of mine who have got misled on these things because they thought they're just smart, they're giving ideas. I'm a lawyer, what can I do? I'm having my immunity, I'm just giving advice. You need to be careful as to where and at what point of time you're giving the advice so that you are not becoming a part of the team committing the offense. So a lot of times, especially lawyers, I feel we need to understand where is that line as to am I a part to the offense? Because the moment he has done a particular offense, they may come to you during the offense being continued and taking advice from you. At that point of time, you start giving them a structure to clean up the mess or start giving them structure to see how they can't be traced out. Whether that advice falls under the bucket of you becoming a co-conspirator or not, and where exactly you draw the line. Okay, fine, you have done the offense, you have packed an FIR, now come, let's advise. Fine, but cleaning up the traits, cleaning up your tracks, when does that tantamount to white collar crime? As a lawyer, please be careful, because that also is an offense. On a lighter note, I usually say to these sort of questions, or when they pop up or incidences, I like to give postpaid advice and not prepaid advice. Prepaid advice is a little more riskier, a little more gray area, because if long back there was a case which a friend, this thing, and I can't, it had even come out in the papers, and that was the learning time when I was having an instance to see where is the line where you give the advice saying, this is something I am not going to be a part of, you're not going to take advice to me, and they're not going to spare you because they have already put their leg into, let's say one leg into it, and they realize that it's an offense, but now they don't know how to come back, obviously they do not want to go and surrender, or they do not want to admit it and take it. So giving advice to retract, you have to be very, very careful. It's actually even, I would suggest you should be double careful than giving enough advice to once the offense is committed. So it's better give postpaid advice, it's easier. Again, if you see, for example, you'll have to read the PMLA Act, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, where the Enforcement Directorate takes charge, where they do their investigation, how they do it. Again, Companies Act has got SFIO. Once SFIO takes cognizance of it, how they will investigate, what is their perspective of investigation. Sometimes they just limit their angle to 5 transactions. Let's see the trail till the end. Let's see how is it. Start doing. Or I would suggest you have to take up some 2-3 cases, start following those cases from the start till the end. Now, a lot of things are available online, a lot of judgments you get online. You may be able to, law students, you all may be having good seniors where you're doing your internships or getting a good exposure if your relatives are in it. You can follow some cases, because once you follow a case from the start to an end, it's quite interesting because you will understand how it completely works. Theoretically, you may see, okay, you filed an appeal, you got an order, you walked. It's not that easy. There's a lot of things that happen at the back end. It's interesting also. Now, I'll just give you one example which came out like last week. This is a case that we were working. I will give very limited information because there's a likelihood of this getting challenged or getting sub judice. So this was a case whereby a brief insight, again, this is an online order copy which is available. It was passed on the first week of June this month. And it came out in the paper. It's there in Times. So if you look at this case is something which we were a part of it, whereby what happens, company A is started off, they float 5-6 paper companies. All this is there in the order copy. So it's not something that I'm divulging confidential information, but if you're interested, please read up. The order copy itself is quite self-sufficient to give you a brief insight about the entire happening. So what happens here is a lot of paper companies are floated. Bank borrowings is done based on fictitious purchases, sales, invoices. They show a lot of turnover, they show a lot of credibility. Then funds are taken, funds are then deployed to buy another hotel as an advance. Finally, they say, hey, look, we're not buying that company, sorry. So the advance of, I'm talking about 125 crores advance, not like you went and gave 50 rupees, 5,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees. 125 crore advance is given, and then they decide, okay, the hotel is not being bought. And the other company, which receives the advance, keeps the 125 crores in its books. So it's not that they have denied that, oh, I didn't receive the 125 crores. He never went ahead with a complete deal. He did not complete the entire transaction. So this 125 is with me. I have to repay him, but when I have money, I'll repay him. In between, this company goes bankrupt. It goes to IBC, bankruptcy, it's admitted, a resolution professional appointed. That company also has borrowed funds from several banks way before this transaction also. Banks are now, the question comes whether this money is tainted money, proceeds of crime, whether IBC has got a control over it, or whether the PMLA tribunal, Prevention of Money Laundering Tribunal, has control over it. Whether NCLT is going to pass an order or PMLA. So this has become between two. Both have gone bankrupt. Both are missing. Both owners are not taking any responsibility. But it is finally one bank fighting out with another set of banks who is actually claiming that this is my money which has gone off, and he's saying I funded it earlier. This is this money. So end of the day, the people who have done the fraud are actually not into this issue in hand, but it is finally they're not able to trace it out as to who has got good control on it. I'll go a little faster. Again, a lot of misconception is that it's not violent, it's not going to, just because it's white collar. Again, like I said, there's a lot of blackmail, kidnapping, violent, a lot of things to bury witnesses, murders are committed. These are all high stakes. So things are a lot more riskier when you get involved doing it. Read up, be well appraised of what the laws say before you give advice, because this, like I said, the stakes are high, consequences are high, and stuff like that. I'm just skipping these slides because I think I'm running out of time. I was told I'll have to wrap it up quickly. So again, occupational crimes as well as business crimes. Some people do it by an occupation itself. They are having a good influence, they're having a good control power, they keep doing it. Sometimes they're done with a business, basically on a mechanism that a model of a crime is done where it is. So like I said, some examples, if you see, are the Telgi scam, 2G spectrum, 176,000 crores. But where is it? Where is the money? Why you just can't trace out the money? God knows. That's where the entire thrill of these white collar crimes start. coming up and going in. And yes, my suggestions are be a little preventive, do things professionally. If things are something for the fun of it, or if you're just trying to advise, or if you're trying to give something on it, be cautious, check with seniors, check with people who have got better experience, rather than just trying to give some advice, because these are all criminal consequences are also there where prosecution is there. It ends up with imprisonment, so be careful on it. So yeah, with this, I think we've completed, and I'm now worried with the Q&A session. So how do we do the questions?
So thank you, sir, for this enlightening session. There are some questions by the participants, so I will request you to address them.
Okay. Where do I see these questions? On the chat box?
So I would be asking this.
Okay.
So I would be asking.
Sure.
May I?
Please.
So the first question is, what careers are available in the white-collar crime prevention and investigative field?
From a career perspective, again, I'm not going to be the best person to advise this, but my idea is, if you look at, see, these are large stakes, high stakes involved. So it's large law firms who have a full setup bandwidth. So it's either you join law firms, or for starting, like if I'm not wrong, SFI office, ED offices, they all recruit investigating people, lawyers and all. So you can take some sort of an internship and do it with these authorities is one. The other one is when it comes to join law firms or join big ones which have the bandwidth to assess these cases. That would be how I would suggest. Either the law firm, because an individual, for him to do a high profile white collar crime is quite, chances are less for you to get an opportunity to work. He may do 1 or 2 a year, but you will not have 2, 3 running parallelly at any given point of time.
Okay, sir. So the next question is, what are the obstacles that prevent catching white-collar crime offenders?
Like I said, a lot is technology is advancing. The laws are quite remote, and these laws were made way back and they did not evolve over a period of time. So obviously the law is not catching up. 1, 2, if you actually go to a layman, I'll give you an example which probably happened to a friend of mine. So there was an offense, and the guy had embezzled funds from the company by making fake bank accounts. So the company officials itself traced it back, found them out, traced them, got the guy, brought him to the room. I was also called. This is where I was saying you should not start off in the beginning. So that guy, he literally cried. He said, yes, by mistake I did. I'll repay the money. Then we called the cops. I took him to the police station together. He confessed. But believe me, the inspector, the investigating officer for white collar crimes said it doesn't work like a crime. He's not a law and order problem where he's having a gun or he's having a bomb attached to him. I need to arrest him and put him behind bars. They let him free that day. They told it's fine. He's offended. Okay, fine. But this doesn't work like that. He went out. Then after 2-3 months of investigation is when they were able to arrest him back. So it's completely different as to when it's a white collar crime. And investigating authorities also should have the mindset and the knowledge to do it, which many a time they don't have also. You have to explain them of what an email went, how this went, or how the bank phishing, or how your account was done, those sort of things.
So the next question is, how are companies managing the risks associated with white-collar crime?
One advice is to have a D&O insurance, at least for the top management. You take a directors and officers insurance. So one mitigating option is to keep an insurance. But again, for banking and all these things, over a period of time, you have to have a lot of checks and balances, random audits, a lot of third-party independent assessments. Even from SEBI now, they have started out this concept of doing the assessment. Banks always had, if you look at the amendments that have come out from an audit, the same auditor you cannot keep having for so many years, you have to change it, alter it. So these sort of things only, because it's, like I said, it's a lot of people are a part of a team. So it's not without the auditor, the company cannot, the investment cannot happen. It's the auditor is a part of it, the finance is part of it, the execution is part of it. So a lot of people are mixed into it. So therefore it goes into it.
So the next question is fraud in connection with an otherwise legitimately operated mutual hedge fund comes under the white-collar crimes or not?
Again, like I said, to me, there is no specific definition of this is only white-collar crime or this does not. tantamount to white collar crime. So it is more of the crime and the offenses that are there, and the department which will start the investigating authority. So there is no specific white collar crime investigating office or white collar crime law or section that says. So ideally, yes, because it fulfills the hedge fund technology related high end one. But again, if it's a small minuscule value one, may not, depends on the value also and the model and the mechanism.
So the next question is, are defendants in white collar crime cases treated any differently than other defendants?
Legally, law does not give them much of a particular protection or something. But there are two things if you look at a realistic angle. One, obviously, because they are influential people, they are high level people, so they have got better advice as to when probably to leave the country or what passports you should take or when you should not be there or something like that. Could be advices which they are able to get, how they are able to avail, because they obviously pay for the best resources, get the best advice, and with their influence, obviously, they may get benefits of better treatments. But yeah, if you look at the Sahara case or whatever, I can't give you an exact answer being a lawyer.
Okay, sir. So the last question is, what role does technology play in managing white collar crime risk?
See, if you look at it, like we work closely with the big four, EY and all of them, they have a separate forensics department. I'm just giving an example. So they have a lot where today the laptop, they're able to probably, if you give them a laptop, they're able to, even if you erase it, they're able to go back, find out, get the material and give it. So the entire forensics department of any of these EYs and PwCs itself are very interesting about how they're able to do, how they're able to undo a lot of things, because people who are doing the offense are trying to clean up their trails, and these people have to follow those trails to get it out. So if an employee has, let's say we had a case where an employee is working for the organization and he's giving completely all the insider information to his competitor. How could you build up the case? Because he just copies it in a pen drive, takes it, goes, gives this data. So let's say sales data is given across. He takes out, he gives it out, and he knows XYZ, these are the big distributors, go take them off. These sort of things, how do you undo it? That's going to be a challenge, but there are things in it. People do work. There are things where he does a mistake. He probably sent it through his personal mail ID, which they are able to trace it out and find it out, which happened in one case of ours. So that was our building case where we said he had a company where his wife was receiving funds. So we pulled the trail saying that his compensation or the bribe was getting into his wife's account, and this was going from his personal email ID. He has sent one or two by mistake when the pen drive was probably not working.
Thank you, sir. Now, I would humbly request Professor Dr. Rajesh Bhogana, sir, to say a few words.
Okay. After of course, today is the last lecture in this series. And today I have gone through the lecture given by Mr. Chatterjee. So this was very contemporary topics, and the way Mr. Chatterjee has explained to you, he started right from the concept, what the concept is. Because many of us are not clear about the concept. Its key characteristics also he has given you in detail, and most importantly, when he related it to the popular white collar crimes in India, and also the profile of the such criminals. So that made the lecture very interesting, and it is related with everyone. And he has given us the causes also, and all what the contributing factors have. And finally, when the law is also given, it's a complete class now. So those who have studied this concept in sociology, they will be, I understand, more benefited, because now this addition along with the law has given them very clear picture. So I thank you, Mr. Chatterjee, it's really our honor and privilege to welcome you at this juncture. You have elaborately stated, and the question which you have taken today, that was also very nicely arranged. And at this juncture, I would like to first of all congratulate our Moot Court Society for organizing so wonderful lecture series on contemporary issues, and particularly around 5 speaker has spoken in this platform, and we have listened Mr. Varun Tyagi, and he is law clerk with Honorable Mr. Justice Viren Sarangi. He has given very practical insight about how the law clerkship works and all about that. That talk on law clerkship was very meaningful. We have also listened Mr. J.M. Sharma, senior advocate and mediator, who has given a talk on the mediation as a tool for access to justice. It was very meaningful talk, and at the same time, Mr. Sanpreet Singh Ajmani, who is the president of Youth Bar Association, he has shared the practical experience of mediation and the importance of mediation in the present era that was discussed in this series. We have also listened Mr. Surendu Shankar Das, advocate on record, Supreme Court of India. He has also dealt with very contemporary issues like info technology, data, artificial intelligence, and intersectionality with the Constitution of India. That was really a meaningful talk, and today's talk, the very brilliant and absolute talk by Mr. Gaurav Chatterjee, partner at Kocher and Company on the white collar crimes. So with this my blessing, congratulations, everything goes to the organizing committee. I congratulate Professor Poonam Rawat, who is the chairperson of Moot Court Society and presently officiating principal of Law College Dehradun. Congratulations, ma'am. I must congratulate the president of Moot Court Society, Ms. Anna Anupriya, along with her, his vice president, Mr. Dennis Khan, and convener, and who has been instrumentality in organizing in this series, very nearly Mr. Rahul Kumar Sharma, and the secretary, Ms. Gauri Agrawal, and the entire office bearer and different hosts who have conducted this. If I'm not taking name, they must understand my all the blessing is with entire Moot Court Society team. God bless you, my dears. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I would request Mr. Danish Khan, Vice President, Moot Court Society, to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Ria. Having come to end of today's webinar, which is also the last lecture of this entire series, let me, without further delay, propose a vote of thanks to everyone who made this possible. Most importantly, I would like to thank our keynote speaker for today's lecture, Mr. Gaurav Kocher, partner Kocher and Company, for introducing and elaborating on the concept of white collar crime. It was nothing short of a specialized insight of the topic, and we are grateful for the enriching session. Thank you, sir. Next, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Rajesh Bhaguna and Dr. Poonam Rawat ma'am, a patron and chairperson respectively, who constantly support and encourage us very time we present any learning opportunity for any law student. It is a 9 lecture organized within a span of 20 days and on a range of varying topics, including contemporary and profession based. With the immense vision of Dr. Bahuguna and Dr. Rawat, we are constantly inspired to organize the event on this manner, while also expanding our horizons. Another subject of our immense gratitude is the Youth Bar Association of India, especially Mr. Sanpreet Singh Ajmani, for providing not just the technical support, but also with his continuous presence and support, without which this seminar wouldn't have been possible. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants who registered for and attended the seminar and made this experience richer, without which this event would have been incomplete. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.